Hello, everyone. Today I want to talk about this article that I saw by Games Radar, and it's regarding the Witcher 3 devs who are now working on a vampire RPG at the same time as they're working on The Witcher 4. Different teams, I know, you know what I mean. Blood of the Dawnwalker. I'm sure we've all seen the trailer. It looks absolutely amazing. And I'm really excited about eventually seeing more of that and maybe, playing it at launch if it looks impressive enough for me and I feel like I could get away with it in my budget. And I think that most of you are thinking the exact same thing. However, I just saw this article with a quote in the title that goes, Witcher 3 dev says his new vampire RPG Blood of Dawnwalker wants to challenge genre conventions, but only if we are changing them to actually achieve some goal. This is a very interesting thing to say. Now, if you've played Fallout 1 and if you've played Fallout 2, you will kind of have some experience with the concept that is being brought about by Blood of the Dawnwalker, which is the idea that you have a time limit. For the people who played Fallout 1 a long, long time ago when it first came out, you would know that you have a grand total of 70 in-game days to complete the story before things start going bad. If I'm not mistaken, you have, I think, no, it's 365 days before you lose outright. And then, yeah, I think it's about a year. I'll leave up the actual number like right here. And then you can laugh at me in the comments for getting it wrong out of memory and not double checking before I started recording the video. One take every time, regardless. You will be aware of the idea of playing an RPG with a time constraint. Now, Blood of the Dawnwalker, from what I understand of past interviews, it's meant to be gated based on the missions. So when you complete a mission, whether it be a main mission or a secondary mission, time advances. And this is an experimental thing. It was experimental at the time as well. And the reason why it's experimental is because nobody really likes that, let's be honest. So the idea of gating things by time and preventing players from just completing everything in an RPG may well be a bad feature. However, if we get it right, and by we I mean, the devs of the game, not us, but if we get a product that was made correctly, it will be very interesting because it will mean that the game becomes that much more replayable. Now, I've said this before a number of times. RPGs live off of content that you miss, right? So, what does this mean? It means that when you're playing an RPG, especially an RPG with multiple different endings, usually there is a path, and then the path branches. And then let's say we go this way. Nothing on this side can now be accessed by me. None of this story, none of this NPC interaction, none of these items. They're all gone, right? And then we keep going this way, and then it branches off again. And now this side goes away, and it branches off again, and this side goes away, and branches and branches and branches and branches and branches, right? Now, when I played Cyberpunk 2077, there was some branching that was added in Phantom Liberty. And it kind of wasn't done in the best of ways, in my opinion. Specifically, I'm talking about how if you make a certain decision, I'm not going to talk about what it is. The game's only been out. The game hasn't been out for so long that everybody's played it. But I mean, most people have probably played it. Regardless, if you choose to make a certain decision at a certain point in the game, you miss out on, I believe it's 3 unique items that you cannot access. They had to patch in those items being thrown into a store later in the game so that you could access them. I think that Cyberpunk 2077 throughout the entirety of the game, was a game where you could access everything. And then in Phantom Liberty, they added this one thing that you can't access. Now, the final mission also kind of has this, where once you finish that final mission, you get some unique items, and then you have to like reload the game. You keep those items, and then you have to do it again and again and again and again. So you can, again, still get all of these items. What I'm trying to get at here is Cyberpunk 2077 was not made with the concept of you missing out on content. It was made with the idea of if you explore, you can get everything, which is also an interesting way to do an open world RPG. Let's talk about Skyrim, for example, the peak of open world RPGs when it came out. You had all of these amazing, unique items out in the world. They're worse than what you can make yourself, but, you know, honestly, the crafting in Skyrim was way overtuned. Regardless, once you get to these missions, you're usually given a choice. In almost all situations, you're given a choice. Either get the item and do something evil, because they're Daedric artifacts, they're demon items, or don't do the evil thing and miss out on the item. Now, Skyrim is a game that doesn't really have a karma system, doesn't really have an alignment system, so the idea of just missing out on an item for an intangible punishment is a little silly. However, let's talk about a game that we played on stream not so long ago, Dark Messiah of Might and Magic. Now, you have two endings, the good ending and the bad ending. If you choose to go with the bad ending, you get the power to turn into a demon. This demon transformation is very strong, gives you a lot of power. You're practically unkillable if you're playing the game right. I think you're still damageable, so you can still be taken down, but you're very strong is what I'm trying to say. Alternatively, you can purify yourself of this demon, and instead you get access to holy weapons, which are extremely effective against the final enemies of the game, which are undead. So the end result is you're roughly at the same power level. It's about, you know, it's about the flavor that you choose. And what I'm trying to get at here is, yes, missable content, very good. What isn't good is to make your players feel punished for making a certain decision. And if you do that, players will be less interested in your choices. However, from what I understand of Blood of the Dawnwalker, the entire game is built around the fact that you have to make choices. When you get to a certain point, okay, I have to choose mission A, B, or C, because once I complete one of these missions, the other two become unavailable. This creates a very interesting dynamic, especially if they go as deeply with it as they went with Witcher 3, and with Cyberpunk, in terms of quest design. Because one thing that CDPR has done is writing, right? I don't think anybody can argue that CDPR is one of the best writers in the medium right now. The thing that made Witcher 3 the game that it was the fact that you go into a village, you talk to a random citizen, and he gives you a side mission, and instead of that side mission is, go to the cemetery and kill 5 ghouls, that mission would actually be, Witcher, there's something in the cemetery, we don't know what it is, can you investigate? And then you go to the cemetery, and you encounter hints of something there, and you investigate, you find the 5 ghouls, you kill the 5 ghouls, and then it turns out that these 5 ghouls, they killed a little girl. Oh my god. And so you take that little girl back to the village, and now the guy goes, oh my god, they ate my little girl. No, that's where she went this whole time. How could this have happened to me? It's an extra step in writing, and it doesn't, when you just put it into words like that, it doesn't seem like that much, but it is. It's 2, 3, 4, 5 extra steps ahead of every other game out there. Let's look at Avowed. I haven't played Avowed. Most people haven't played Avowed because it looks bad. It doesn't sell itself. There's a reason why if you go on YouTube and you look for Avowed gameplay, you pretty much just see some reviews. You don't see people posting clips, you don't see people posting interesting quests, you don't see people posting tutorials, you don't see none of that. Because the game doesn't have the depth. Skyrim had all of that. Skyrim had all these fun moments. Skyrim had interesting quests, an amazing world to explore, amazing items, cool quest lines, stuff that you could miss out on, all that stuff. Avowed, I don't know damn thing about it, right? I think that Blood of the Dawnwalker, when it comes out, will be a very interesting game, right? But I've been waffling for 10 minutes and we still haven't gotten to this article. So let's actually look through this article, because I have no idea if everything that I said here even relates tangentially to this article. I just saw this little quote here, and I wanted to talk about what I had heard before about Blood of the Dawnwalker, and I wanted to talk about my hopes and expectations for it. But let's see. Sometimes even very mild changes can be extremely controversial to people. True. So, despite being a brand new studio working on its first game, the team at Rebel Wolves are no strangers to making groundbreaking RPGs. The studio was founded by Conrad Conrad, who was one of 3 game directors on The Witcher 3, with a team bolstered with fellow ex-CDPR staffers, including his brother, Matthews. And while the new developer could undoubtedly play it safe and stick to its roots, yeah, but why, you know? Its ambitions are to once again break a new ground for RPGs with its debut title, The Blood of Dawnwalker. But not just for the sake of it. Speaking with Games Radar Plus, Matthews, creative director at Rebel Wolves, explained the studio's approach to experimentation with the genre's conventions. There are certain features that players have gotten used to over the years because there have been so many RPG games, where you just expect to see them in the RPG game when you play. For example, itemization and having an inventory panel. If you don't have that in an RPG, a lot of people could probably try to challenge, is it an RPG even? He's got a good point, right? Like, I feel like a lot of the times people expect items in an RPG, and it's to the detriment of the RPG. For example, Witcher 3, right? I think that in Witcher 3, you get so many items with randomized stats that it's not as interesting. Whereas if the items were set, you know, you got the longsword, and the longsword always has the same stats. And you have unique items, which always have the same stats. And then you have different types of items, which always have roughly the same stats. It becomes a lot more interesting. It makes the crafting more meaningful. It makes doing certain quests for certain items more meaningful. Whereas the way that it is, where it's almost kind of like an ARPG, where the items are so randomized that it doesn't even mean anything, it loses a lot of its impact. I call back to Dragon Age Origins, right? Where you had the item types. So you got the longsword, you got the war axe, you got the mace, all that stuff, right? And then you have the tiers, and then you have the unique items, which are a certain type of weapon in a certain type of tier with a certain additional benefits which make them better. And I think by doing that, you make a very interesting game where people go, oh, I feel very rewarded for doing this mission because this is this type of weapon, but improved in this certain way, which makes it this much better, right? You know, and I think that the changes that were made to Cyberpunk with the Edgerunners patch made it that much better because they added that certainty. This gun is always at this level. It levels up with you if you get it at a certain level, so it's like, you know, but it's always at this level. And then you get a unique item, and it always has these stats. It's always this good. And it added a certain level of stability to the game, a certain level of certainty that makes it better. But if your character uses a specific weapon, let's say Ciri in Witcher 4, your character uses a specific weapon, it's weird to throw that out. Kind of, you know what? Let's talk about KCD2. One of the things that I dislike about KCD2 is the fact that Pebbles is a horse that you're going to throw out. Well, actually, this is more in KCD1. In KCD2, you have a hidden perk that most people don't know about, where if you ride Pebbles enough, she gets upgraded and becomes the best horse in the game. I think that it would be much better to, rather than nothing, boom, best horse in the game, right? rather than do that, how about instead, once you ride a certain amount, the speed improves. Once you use it for a certain amount of time, her carry speed improves. Once you fight with her a bunch of times, courage improves. Stuff like this. Make it gradual until she becomes so good, right? And don't give us the option to throw out Pebbles, because Pebbles is something that matters to Henry. And the same thing with Witcher 4, right? Ciri's sword was given to her by Geralt. Its name is Zurael. It has a name, right? So I would be very upset to see that once we actually start playing the game, we're actually expected to just chuck that sword out at level 5 and get a new one. I'd be very upset about that. I would much rather have runes, which is something that exists in the Witcher lore, right? You put runes on the weapon, and then you clear them out, and you put new runes when you want to improve the weapon. I think that would be much more interesting than replacing the weapon, because then you keep the weapon, you still have the RPG elements. It's kind of like in Planescape Torment. In Planescape Torment, your character doesn't wear armor. Instead, he wears tattoos. And so you wear these tattoos to protect yourself and to improve yourself. You don't wear armor. You're always bare chest in that shit. Right? And so, yes, itemization kind of should exist to some extent, but at the same time, it's important to know how to do it, right? Because if you have no itemization, it's just an action game. But you need the right type of itemization. You can't just say, oh, all the items, like Inquisition, right? The itemization in Veilguard was kind of interesting. I enjoyed it. I think that the itemization in Veilguard was genuinely pretty good. I will hear no criticisms on this. I think the itemization in Veilguard was interesting. Each item was unique. Each item fit into a certain build. Not all the builds were good. That's a failure on the developer's side. But all the items were unique. All the items were interesting. Okay? But let's continue reading this article. Thomas Kiwix added, when you sit down to design an RPG, you have to wrestle with that. This is the standard RPG set of conventional mechanicals. Do we do them or don't we? And you have to always consider it very carefully. Which of these can you touch or modify in meaningful ways? However, in many ways, RPGs are a tried and true formula, and the team is still cautious about what it will and won't stray away from typical conventions with. If you look at different games and the response of the fans of people playing them, sometimes even very mild changes can be extremely controversial to people. They'll say, it's not an RPG, or the game is ruined. Even if it's not really a huge change on paper, it can be a huge change for players. So you need to be extremely careful every time. That's true. Once you make a change, you need to consider all the little changes that get made with it. For example, I'm in a D&D game right now, putting you on blast. He changed the pantheons of the gods, right? D&D. And he's using the same names, but slight changes. Problem. He didn't tell us. He didn't tell the players until we questioned him about it. This is a big deal, right? In D&D, gods are very meaningful. So once you make a small change, because you don't consider it super important, once it hits the players, now it's a big change because, hey, backstories no longer work. The paladin can't follow the same god that he would normally. The barbarian with a traumatized past that is trying to get away from her parentage, who happens to be a dragon. Hey, that has an implication with gods. That has an implication with all sorts of things. It's important to actually take your time and analyze, what will this change bring about, even if it's a small change. So let's continue. The Witcher 3 devs created a Jekyll and Hyde style character for their new vampire RPG because nobody yet has done that. Vampire the Masquerade kinda did it, but not to a great extent. You could just do all Jekyll or all Hyde, and you want to have to change between the two, right? You want to create a situation where the player themselves want to change between the two. Blood of the Dawnwalker devs explain how the Vampire RPG's narrative sandbox builds on what they were known for crafting in games like The Witcher 3. There's also Vampire, which was very interesting, but that was, again, either all Jekyll or all Hyde, right? Ultimately, the main reason to change things has to be meaningful for the team at Rebel Wolves to consider doing it. Exactly. According to Thomas Thomas Kiewicz, who said, at the same time, you always need to think about what are we gaining if we try to change things? Are we just changing them to be different, or are we changing them to actually achieve some goal? Yes, yes, yes. This is exactly how you need to think about it. So, Blood of the Dawnwalker still a whiles away? Yeah, okay. So, the article itself didn't have a lot of information, which, yeah, right? I don't even think this game is coming out in 2026, let alone this year, right? It's a whiles away. But that is a quote that makes me hopeful. The quote, you have to be tough. Otherwise, you have to be tough. What am I saying? You have to be tough on yourself with these changes. You can't just make a change and go, oh, it'll be neat. No, you can't do that. You have to be careful. You have to be tough on yourself and careful with what you change. Because it's like, why is this bottle here? Moves bottle aside. Table collapses, right? You have to be careful. It's like, why is this here? Who put this here? Let me analyze this bottle. Okay, I can see why it's here. So, we're going to move this aside, and we are going to put this here instead. See? The slot is filled. It's a lot neater. It's this thing. It's like, let's try it out. Let's see how it feels, right? And so you gotta be careful, because it's like, it's just a fucking bottle in the middle of the table. There's no reason for it to be there, right? Maybe, or maybe not. Something to think about. Let me know how excited you are about Blood of the Dawnwalker. I know I'm really excited. I think that The Witcher 3 and CDPR people have absolutely earned a little bit of my confidence when it comes to RPGs. So, I'm looking forward to it, and I can't wait to play it. But I'm still going to be keeping an eye on them to make sure that they don't fuck it up. Let me know what your thoughts are. Let me know what you think. Let me know what your expectations are. Let me know of what mechanics you think in RPGs might be worth changing. Who knows? You might have something that some game developer somewhere will look at it, and, 3 years from now, a game comes out and they say, well, I read this YouTube comment on this video by this one guy who didn't even have 1,000 subscribers, and it was like, oh my god, it revolutionized my way of seeing RPGs. So, let me know what you think. Put that comment out there, and I'll see you guys next time. Like, subscribe. Cheers.